She slid the hoodie across the table like it was roadkill she couldn't stand to touch. "Here's a parting gift." She smiled, sweet, polished, venomous. Beside her, her father, my CEO, said nothing, just watched as 12 years of my life fit neatly into that one humiliating gesture. They thought the meeting ended there. Hoodie, gift card, goodbye. But in truth, that was the moment it all began. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or discarded by people who thought your silence meant surrender, listen closely, because this is the story of how arrogance cost a CEO's daughter everything, how one clause buried in paperwork became my quiet $5 million revenge. It's strange how fast loyalty can turn obsolete. One week you're a core member of the founding team, indispensable, irreplaceable, praised at every investor dinner. The next, you're a line item under cost optimization. I joined their startup back when it was nothing more than a shaky slide deck and a rented garage that smelled like burnt coffee and overconfidence. It wasn't glamorous, cracked tiles, leaky air conditioner, and that constant hum of servers struggling to stay alive. But I loved it. I believed in the mission, a new platform that could connect small vendors worldwide using AI logistics. While others saw chaos, I saw potential. Back then, Richard, her father, was magnetic in that visionary way charismatic failures often are. He knew how to paint impossible dreams with perfect words. And Emma, his daughter, was the face of those dreams. A business degree, a sharp wardrobe, and that easy entitlement that came from never truly struggling for a paycheck. She spoke like a TED Talk, full of buzzwords she barely understood, but investors ate it up because presentation always beats perspiration. Behind the curtain, I was doing a heavy lifting, building the product architecture from scratch, line by line, debugging through dawn. 12-hour days blurred into weekends. There were nights when I slept under my desk and woke to the smell of the janitor's mop. And somewhere during those long nights, Emma began dropping by. She'd bring me coffee, flat whites, always in that pale blue cup, and sit on the corner of the desk pretending curiosity. "I don't know how you do it," she'd sigh dramatically. "All this pressure, all this math, I could never." I'd laugh because at that point I thought it was camaraderie. Now I see it for what it was, reconnaissance. One night I caught her glancing at my notes, pages of handwritten sketches, system frameworks that I guarded like blueprints to my mind. She smiled when she noticed I noticed. "Just curious," she said, "trying to learn the genius stuff." I should have listened to the instinct that clenched my stomach then. But instead, I explained things to her, showed her how the neural routing worked, how the back-end architecture linked with our vendor APIs. Because that's what loyalty does. It clouds your radar while you hand over ammunition to your future enemy. Months turned into years. The company grew. We moved out of the garage into a glimmering downtown office, complete with ergonomic chairs and an espresso machine worth my car. Investors started visiting more often. I found myself herded into corners like a ghost, introduced as our tech wizard. Cute, diminishing. Still, I told myself titles didn't matter as long as the product thrived. Until one afternoon, I walked into a board presentation and saw my own work on the screen. My diagrams, my annotations, but with someone else's watermark. Emma Sterling, Chief Innovation Officer. I stared, waiting for someone to acknowledge the theft. No one did. She noticed me, flashed that perfect PR smile, and mouthed, "We'll talk later." We never did. The edits to our investor decks became more frequent, my slides shrinking while her photo spreads grew larger. My accomplishments were being rewritten in real time, a digital erasure of everything I'd built. When I pointed it out to Richard, he exhaled heavily, like a parent indulging a moody teenager. "You're overreacting," he said. "Emma's name carries weight with investors. The story sells better when she's front and center. It's just marketing." "Marketing?" I said quietly, "because according to this, I hardly exist." He smiled the way people do when they think money excuses ethics. "Look, it's all semantics. You'll get your equity when we IPO." I nodded then, but something inside me fractured. That night, I walked home through the drizzle, the city lights blurring around me. Each droplet that hit my face felt like punctuation, tiny cold reminders that my contributions were being washed away piece by piece. Still, I wanted to believe it was fixable. 2 months later, it wasn't. While reviewing a shared drive folder, one I wasn't technically supposed to access, I found a file titled Founding Narrative Final. Curiosity overruled caution. I opened it. There it was, the rewritten company history. In bright, bulletproof PR jargon, Emma was credited as the conceptual founder and lead architect of the entire system. Richard was the visionary business strategist, and me, reduced to a footnote under technical support consultants. My hands trembled on the keyboard. You don't forget that kind of betrayal, the sterile efficiency of it. They hadn't even bothered to hide the logging edits. I sat in the dark office long after everyone had gone, the glow of the monitor reflecting off the coffee I wasn't drinking. Hours passed before emotion returned. Not rage at first, just an icy calm. Maybe that's what betrayal does. It freezes you until the hurt turns analytical. Somewhere within that numbness, I remembered an old contract, the founder equity agreement I'd drafted during our earliest months. It contained a clause no one had paid much attention to, an IP co-ownership condition tied to the original framework design, a clause naming me as co-owner of the core intellectual property until explicitly reassigned, a clause Richard had apparently forgotten to amend during all his fundraising frenzy. My pulse steadied. Their oversight? My weapon. The morning after, I acted perfectly normal. I even brought Emma coffee. She looked surprised. What's the special occasion? I said, new beginnings. She laughed. You're too dramatic. Maybe, but in truth, the ending had already begun. Because from that moment on, I started collecting. Quietly, methodically. Every original draft, every time-stamped version history, every email that tied me to the product's creation. And I made sure the paper trail led somewhere only I could find, a folder inside an encrypted private drive, mirrored under a corporate alias. That alias would soon become the single most valuable name on our cap table. But they didn't see any of it coming. They were too wrapped up in their own narrative, too busy preparing for Series B funding. Until one Thursday afternoon, Emma waltzed into my office unannounced, carrying a gift bag. I remember the sound of her heels, a sharp metronome of arrogance. Hey, she said, voice dripping sugar. Can we chat for a sec? Sure, I said, saving my work without looking up. She set the bag on the desk, inside a hoodie with the company logo and a small envelope. I glanced up, questioning. She smiled, bright, pleasant, poison. Per HR, this is your exit package. You're terminated effective immediately. Here's a hoodie and a $50 gift card as a thank you. I blinked slowly. You're joking. No joke, she said sweetly. Restructuring, you understand? Behind her, Richard leaned on the doorway, arms crossed, eyes blank like glazed marble. Not a word, not even goodbye. And just like that, 12 years of blood and brilliance ended in 75 seconds. As they turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the dark screen, expressionless, almost serene. Inside, my pulse had gone tranquil, because they thought this meeting was the end. They had no idea it was a comma, not a period. I remember walking out of that building in a weird haze of quiet rage. It was late afternoon, the kind of sunlight that can't decide whether it wants to be warm or cruel. Pedestrians brushed past me, unaware that I'd just lost 12 years of my life's work for a hoodie and a $50 card. The fabric pressed damp against my palm. It smelled like cheap factory cotton and humiliation. I stood there for a long minute before the first wave hit, the physical reaction you can't reason with. Heart thudding too hard, vision sharp around the edges. Every betrayal you've ever endured suddenly stacks on top of itself. Then came the whisper in my head, "This isn't over." That night, my apartment didn't feel like home. The walls hummed with the leftover vibration of unsent anger. I should have screamed, thrown something. Instead, I sat in silence. Sometimes vengeance begins in silence because you're too tired for fury. I brewed tea I never drank and stared at the hoodie on the kitchen table. The company's logo was embroidered across the chest. Their name builds on my architecture. It looked smug. I pulled out my old hard drive instead, the one labeled simply Founders-01, filled with the earliest frameworks, my first drafts, proof that everything they sold investors was built off my mind. As each file booted up, I felt the ache transform into clarity. Every timestamp, every signature, every forgotten clause. All mine. Over the following days, I played the role of the well-behaved ex-employee. I sent polite acknowledgement emails about handover logistics, even offered to help transition my duties. Emma replied with curt thanks, probably delighted to see I was being professional. What she didn't realize, professionalism was my camouflage. Behind the gestures, I was setting the next phase of my plan. I called a quiet contact of mine, Lawrence, a contract attorney who owed me a favor from his startup days. He answered half asleep, "It's been years, what's up?" "I need confirmation," I said, voice steady. "If a company forgets to amend a founder clause before final execution, is the co-ownership still valid?" He sounded instantly more awake. "Depends on the language. If it was fully executed by all parties and never assigned elsewhere, yes, you still have rights. Hypothetically? In your case, not hypothetical, right?" I smiled faintly into the dark. Not even a little. Over the next week, Lawrence helped me set up a holding company in Delaware, a hollow shell on paper, nothing more than a legal vessel. We transferred the IP rights quietly, digital signatures, time-stamped filings, notarized equations of ownership. By the time the documents cleared, my fingerprints were invisible yet omnipresent. I didn't steal anything, I reminded myself, scrolling through the forms. They gifted it to me through negligence. Genius, mistake, poetic symmetry. It didn't matter what you called it. What mattered, I was no longer powerless. Still, nights were restless. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., drenched in that sticky adrenaline sweat, replaying the conference room humiliation in my head. Her smirk, his silence. That cowardly satisfaction when they thought I'd crumble. I'd grip the sheets until my palms hurt, whispering, "Not yet. Wait." Because patience isn't weakness, it's loading. A few weeks later, word began spreading through the tech community about their massive upcoming Series B. Articles everywhere, sterling tech poised for exponential growth after successful pilot programs. My inbox pinged with newsletters showing Emma's face plastered in interviews. Headline, "The young visionary behind the platform revolution." I didn't feel envy. I felt precision. Each puff piece was another breadcrumb leading me closer to the perfect stage for exposure. Their next funding round meant due diligence. Due diligence meant paperwork. Paperwork meant, eventually, me. But waiting wasn't easy. There were moments I questioned my own sanity. What if they found the error and fixed it? What if the legal tangle collapsed under corporate pressure? Part of me tempted to strike early, to leak something, call a journalist, sabotage quietly. Every time the impulse came, I forced myself to stop. Half revenge is still servitude. I wanted total resolution. So I waited. Worked freelance gigs under a pseudonym to keep bills paid. Rewired my routine entirely. Morning runs, late-night coding, detaching bit by bit from old loyalties. And yet the silence between those routines filled with echoes of that meeting. Her voice saying, "Here's your hoodie," replaying every time I zipped my jacket. That single moment of mockery had imprinted itself inside me like a scar with its own heartbeat. One gray morning nearly 2 months later, Lawrence called from a blocked number. "They're filing pre-funding disclosures," he said. "Guess whose holding company just showed up in their ownership search?" My stomach tightened like drawn wire. "Are we exposed?" He laughed softly. "No, you're documented as legitimate co-owner of the IP, which means they can't proceed unless you sign a release." In that instant, all the sleepless nights crystallized into one sharp word: gotcha. I spent that evening organizing my evidence, backing up every file onto encrypted drives, checking every signature chain, triple verifying my ownership tokens. It was like preparing for war, but the kind where nobody knows you're coming. Outside, thunder cracked somewhere over the Hudson. Inside, my apartment glowed with blue monitor light, a bunker of justice. And sitting there, wrapped in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was restoration. They'd stolen my narrative. Now, I would take theirs. Around that time, an old colleague reached out, Elena, our former UX designer. She left months before me, tired of the politics. We met at a cafe under the pretense of catching up. But when she asked, "So, how are things?" her eyes were sharp with curiosity. I smiled carefully. "Freelancing, finding perspective." She leaned in. "Word is, they're treating you like Voldemort. No one's allowed to say your name." I sipped my coffee. "That's fine. Ghosts are useful creatures." Elena laughed uneasily, not sure whether I was joking. "Seriously, whatever happened in there, I hope you're okay." "I will be." I meant it like a prophecy. Meanwhile, Emma was everywhere. Podcasts, interviews, LinkedIn celebrations. Each new PR post felt like another notch on the countdown timer. The higher she rose, the harder the fall would sound. And still, I waited. Until one Friday evening, an encrypted alert popped up on my private drive. Automated notification. Series B investor access request. Authorized review of company IP filings. The countdown had begun. I went out that night not to celebrate, but to breathe. A steady drizzle coated the city, neon lights reflecting off wet asphalt. People hurried by under umbrellas, hunched against the chill. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel stillness. No more speculation, no more what-ifs. Just inevitability moving toward them like a tidal current they couldn't see. I walked home slowly, almost ritualistically. On my hallway mirror, I wrote 2 words in red marker: "Stay silent." That silence was my shield, my weapon, and my countdown fuse. The storm was forming, but not outside. It was in their inboxes, their contracts, their audit trails, and they wouldn't even know until the lightning hit. The Sunday before the Series B presentation dawned unexpectedly calm. Outside my window, Manhattan was half asleep, taxis lazy at stoplights, air thick with mist and promise. I brewed coffee and watched the steam curl upward like a quiet omen. After months of patience, the waiting was over. By now, the filings were live. The investors would see the clause. I just didn't know when. I checked my encrypted inbox every hour, then every 30 minutes, then every 5. Each refresh was a heartbeat. By Monday morning, Lawrence called. "They're in evident panic," he said, barely holding back laughter. "My contact at the investor firm told me they hit a documentation discrepancy. The audit flagged your name, and the lawyers are scrambling." A shiver ran down my arms, adrenaline mixed with disbelief. I asked, "Is it solid?" He said, "As Grammet, they can't finalize funding unless you sign the IP transfer. You're their missing key." I stared out the window. Rain streaked the glass like soft confetti. That phrase, "missing key," sat perfectly in my mind. I'd been the key since the start. They'd just tried to replace the lock. Across the river, Sterling Tech was burning. I could almost feel it. The frantic conference calls, the hollow reassurance statements, Emma pacing the glass-walled boardroom demanding answers. I imagined her voice, light and brittle, trying to sound in charge. How is this possible? I thought we terminated her contract. Her father's lower register, defensive. She's bluffing. We'll fix it. Just get the lawyers to clean the paperwork. And then someone quieter, pragmatic, breaking their last illusion. Sir, she doesn't have to bluff. It's filed with the state. She owns 22%. That's the beautiful thing about truth on paper. It requires no performance. It's unshakable. I decided to watch from the shadows. There's something sacred about letting arrogance destroy itself without interference. That week, the news cycle caught whispers. Sterling Tech faces delay in investment round due to IP complications. They called it procedural to save face, but people in the industry know procedural often means fatal. By Thursday, the rumor mill upgraded the phrase to ownership dispute. The sharks started circling. Employees texted me from burner numbers, scared, curious. Is it true you still own part of the platform? We heard the investors are furious. Emma has had 3 meetings in one day. I didn't reply. Silence carried more weight than words ever could. Meanwhile, my world turned methodical. I reviewed the legal documents again, page by page, as if rereading a personal epic. Every signature, every witness line, it felt poetic, like those signatures had been sleeping all these years just to wake today. Then I drafted a single-page statement, plain language, no emotion. To authorize future use of my intellectual property, the parties shall negotiate compensation commensurate with current valuation. Minimum settlement request, $4.2 million, non-negotiable. It wasn't greed, it was arithmetic, years of underpayment measured against justice. When I finished, I printed it, signed with deliberate ink pressure, and placed it in a creme-colored envelope. Simple, final, a quiet manifest of consequences. The next morning, I sent the scanned copy to Lawrence. I told him, "Deliver it when they call." He replied, "They will call. They always do when the floor disappears." The following days pulsed with eerie calm. I spent time walking along the Hudson, watching gulls dive between currents, wondering why victory feels so quiet before it happens. Part of me expected guilt, maybe even pity. None came. Just relief, like exhaling after years underwater. At night, the memories came back. The nights coding alone, her fake compliments, the moment she slid that hoodie across the table. But those memories no longer stung. They were evidence. On Friday, around 11 a.m., my phone lit up with a restricted number. I knew before I answered. "Brett," a voice began, tight, breathless. "Emma." I let the silence stretch. She inhaled sharply. "Look, I know we had differences, but this IP filing thing is a misunderstanding. We just need your signature to move forward, okay? Everyone's nervous and we can make it right." "Can we?" I said softly. "Yes, of course. You helped build this company. You'll get credit, bonus, whatever you want." I imagine her sitting there, manicured nails drumming a table, that trademark confidence cracking at the edges. "I already have credit, and bonuses don't buy ownership." "Come on," she said impatiently, that entitled tone sneaking back in. "Don't be vindictive. This affects real people's jobs." "Those jobs existed because of my work." A pause, then quieter. "Please, don't destroy us." My voice stayed level. "I'm not destroying anything, Emma. I'm just collecting what's mine." Her breath caught. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already did," I said, and hung up. An hour later, Lawrence forwarded her father's formal response, thinly veiled panic disguised as diplomacy. They wanted amicable resolution, asked for good faith negotiation. I answered with one line. "My legal counsel will coordinate all communications. Settlement terms unchanged." Then, nothing but silence, Real, shaking silence. 2 days later, on the morning of the investor review, Sterling Tech's fancy press feed went blank. No posts, no press updates, no exciting growth milestones, just hush. Behind the scenes, as I'd later learn, the lead investor refused to proceed. Without clear IP ownership, the deal was legally unsalvageable. The company hemorrhaged half its valuation overnight. Emails flew between lawyers like shrapnel. I didn't have to read them. Lawrence summarized with one sentence. "They're done bargaining." Then he added quieter, "Her father finally realized this isn't bluster, it's math." On Tuesday, Lawrence met their legal team in a sterile downtown office. He told me later how the daughter kept trying to smile her way through negotiations, offering lower numbers, creative reassignments. Lawrence just placed my envelope on the table. "Take it or leave it," he'd said. "She owns it outright. Without settlement, you can't use your own platform code legally, ever." He said the room went silent so completely he heard their watches tick. Finally, the CEO sighed. The sound of a man watching his empire evaporate. "We'll pay," he muttered. News moved fast. Investors withdrew. Employees flooded LinkedIn with curious career updates. Their company profile dimmed day by day like a candle running out of oxygen. Meanwhile, in my apartment, peace returned slowly. I poured a glass of wine that night, not to celebrate, but to mark the end of noise. It was strange. No thunderclap, no applause, just the rhythmic tick of the city beyond my window. Justice doesn't roar. It concludes. But something unexpected lingered underneath the satisfaction. A faint grief. I mourned what that company could have been if respect had been mutual. So much brilliance squandered for greed and vanity. That's the price of arrogance. Potential sacrificed on its altar. Still, the ache wasn't for them. It was for my own loyalty, finally laid to rest. I folded the original clause document and slipped it into a small folder marked simply "Closure." That folder joined the others in my safe. Proof, memory, cautionary tale. Then I reached into the closet and touched the hoodie. Still soft, still untouched. I laughed quietly. That cheap cotton had started this symphony of consequence. When the transfer confirmation hit my inbox, the number looked unreal. $4,200,000. Even typed in plain courier font, it pulsed with a quiet hum of victory. I leaned back in my chair, staring at it on the screen. 12 years of sweat, humiliation, midnight caffeine binges, reduced to digits and commas. And yet, instead of fireworks, I felt still. Justice doesn't come with trumpets. It arrives like dusk, slow, inevitable, wholly natural. I thought that was the end, but the universe had other plans. Days later, the story broke. First, a whisper on a tech blog. Sterling Tech's Series B implodes amid IP dispute with former co-founder. Within 24 hours, 5 larger outlets picked it up. By day 3, it was front page on TechCrunch. It spread like spilled ink, fast and irreversible. Forums lit up with speculation, screenshots, gossip. They fired the woman who actually built the platform? Classic nepotism meltdown. Imagine losing $5 million over a hoodie. At first, I felt detached. That wasn't my war anymore. But curiosity is a stubborn animal. I couldn't help reading. Employees leaked anonymous confessionals. Someone posted an internal email from Emma that sounded half panicked, half delusional. "We are working proactively to resolve an unforeseen documentation error. Please maintain optimism during this transitional period." Translation: we're collapsing, but smile for the cameras. Within a week, the company's stock options were worthless, their partnership suspended, investors withdrew citing fiduciary uncertainty. Law firms quietly queued for payment. For me, it was surreal. I hadn't raised my voice once, never sabotaged, never leaked. All I'd done was insist that paper tell the truth. That realization carried its own electricity, the calm, measured kind that hums after a thunderstorm. Then came the unexpected invitation. A friend forwarded an event flyer. Women in Innovation, featured speaker, Emma Sterling. Date, 2 weeks after the scandal broke. I almost laughed. Either she was breathtakingly brave or completely oblivious. Curiosity won again. I showed up, sat quietly in the back of the hotel ballroom, half hidden behind a camera tripod. Emma walked on stage, immaculate as ever, hair smooth, voice steady but brittle underneath. She began the speech with the usual lines about resilience and leadership. Then halfway through, her mask slipped. We all face setbacks, and sometimes those we trust most disappoint us. A ripple went through the room. She looked over the audience, maybe scanning faces, maybe sensing ghosts. Her eyes passed over me but didn't settle. Good. I preferred it that way. After the speech, I left without a word. Outside, the city glittered, neon reflecting on puddles. I passed a souvenir shop, ducked inside on impulse, and bought a small keychain, silver, engraved with one word: claws. That word had built my freedom. Weeks later, my life stabilized into something new. I rented a workspace in a shared co-working hub, high ceilings, plants everywhere, the soft buzz of builders chasing ideas. For the first time in years, my code tray opened to my project. Colleagues, former co-workers who quit Sterling Tech in disgust, joined me one by one. We formed a small, principled team focused on transparent development. No cult of personality, no facades. Just competence and respect. We didn't name the company after ourselves. We didn't need to. Our work spoke quietly but confidently, like the revenge that birthed it. Occasionally, journalists asked for comment about the Sterling Tech collapse. I declined each time. The story wasn't about bitterness, it was about balance. If I spoke too much, it would turn into spectacle, and that cheapens truth. Instead, I focused on building. Creating something new feels far better than destroying what was. Still, some nights I'd open my closet and there it hung, the hoodie. Every fold still stiff, logo bright against the fabric. A print of arrogance turned souvenir of resilience. I lifted it down once, slipped it over my shoulders. It was too big now, sleeves swallowing my hands. The logo sat over my heart like a ghost mark. For a second, I almost pitied them. Almost. Then my phone buzzed, another contract signed, this time with investors who valued integrity. I folded the hoodie back on the shelf. Not a trophy, a reminder. Months passed. Sterling Tech filed for bankruptcy. Emma disappeared from media circuits. Her father joined a consultancy that was essentially retirement with better stationery. One afternoon, Lawrence forwarded me a court notice, official closure of their Delaware registration. I read it while sipping tea, smiled faintly, and archived it without ceremony. Just another file in the closure folder. A year later, I was invited to speak at an entrepreneurship summit. Topic: ethics in tech and the price of arrogance. I agreed, reluctantly at first, then realized how fitting it would be. Standing on that stage, looking out over a sea of hopeful faces, I told the story, stripped of names, polished into lesson form. I talked about protecting your work, about contracts as shields, about how integrity can coexist with ambition. People laughed at the hoodie anecdote, gasped at the $5 million twist, applauded the quiet satisfaction in the end. But afterward, when students crowded around to thank me, one young woman asked the real question. How did you stay so calm? How did you wait instead of exploding? I thought about that for a moment, then said, because their noise didn't deserve my sound. Silence gave me strategy. Justice doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it travels in legal clauses and patient waiting. Sometimes it looks like an untouched footy hanging in a closet, or numbers glowing quietly in a bank account. The lesson I took, and the one I share every chance I get, is simple. Never confuse mercy with weakness or arrogance with power. Every document, every promise, every handshake is a mirror. It reflects who you truly are when no one's watching. They fired me to erase me. In the end, I didn't just reclaim my name, I refined it. If life ever hands you a hoodie and a $50 gift card where your worth should be, smile. Take the hoodie, take the card, and start rewriting your contract. Because sometimes vengeance isn't a roar. It's the soft click of justice closing a door. If this story hit a nerve, if you've ever been underestimated and dreamed of quiet vindication, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Because karma doesn't always shout. It whispers through paperwork, patience, and the calm smile of the person everyone thought was powerless.